All right, how's everyone doing? I'm Rich CELENZA. Thanks for tuning in to the Rich CELENZA Show. WTF are you talking about? Sorry, my voice is a little hoarse. I had to go to Chicago this weekend for one of my cousin's weddings. And that's one of the things I want to actually talk about today, actually. But what I'm going to call this podcast is your life getting more intense or less intense? So I've gone back and forth twice out of Chicago this month. I have a very large family. One I went into, they surprised me for a 50th birthday party, which was amazing. They did it actually a month early, which was kind of crazy. So they definitely caught me off guard. And then a few weeks later, then my cousin was getting married. I'm actually the oldest on this side of the family as far as, I'm the oldest boy as far as my grandmother's great-grandchildren go. And then my other grandmother, I'm the oldest just in general, and my youngest cousin of my generation got married. So it's kind of interesting because when I got married, she was just born, basically. She was 1 or 2 months old. So now you have a whole nother wave of my cousins, all these other ones, even older, having children, which is massive. But the one thing I realized that I want to kind of talk about regarding people in general, including my family members, friends, colleagues, and everybody, I realized that as we get older, we are almost programmed starting, I think, from I want to say maybe high school or college, that you must keep the intensity up. And as things progress, things should become more intense. And I think there's a fine line there between taking on more responsibility and making your life more intense, I guess, to a certain degree. Now, again, depending on the lifestyle you have and where you live, this all varies. But I see a lot of my younger cousins, which is a good thing, I think, as far as them wanting a lot of things, which God bless them. They all want bigger homes, more cars. They want a vacation more. They want all these different things. A lot of my cousins are, and some of their husbands and some of their wives, they're all becoming more and more successful, which is a wonderful thing. But I also see a lot of people becoming more and more intense as far as having more and more children, taking on more and more things, and becoming, just very stressed out of their minds. But then, on the other hand, I have some other cousins who are very, let's say, artistic. Some even still live at home with their parents. Some aren't caught up with keeping up with the Joneses and live a very, I don't want to say stress-free lifestyle, but it's definitely something to that component. But when it comes to judging those people, it almost seems like nowadays, I think more than ever, a lot of times, is we're judging each other by what we have or what our lifestyle, how intense is it? Especially on social media. People are trying to prove a lot of times what they're doing that is different than others or that they're doing more than others. And it's a form of an identity, right? Let me get some water here. So I would just say in the film business, I'll just give you some heads up. What I kind of saw when I was making some independent films was I want to make independent films that were raw. Like 20 years ago, it almost looked like you set up a camera and it was almost surveillance. Like I wanted it to be that raw. I wanted it to be that real. That was just my concept. And does it work? Maybe, maybe not. It's just something that I wanted to do. That was the type of movies that were it was a film mockumentary kind of where it looks like a documentary, but it's a film. And as you go on in that industry, you're supposed to, for the most part, keep increasing almost your value as far as what you're producing or creating. And I think the end goal, from what I see for most people, is you start off making films, maybe even television, or it could even be shorts. And then as time goes on, you keep progressing into possibly, and then you could go into documentaries, maybe not. You go into full features. And you may do features for television, then maybe work your way up to film. Or nowadays you could be like I was, independent filmmaker. But you keep progressing into hopefully winning awards. That could include film festivals. I won some there. But then you have the bigger award shows, which would be the Golden Globes, and back to television with the Emmys, and even the Oscars, right? Those are kind of, I think a lot of times I'm just using that progression because it's kind of simple and I think a lot of people understand that. And it's ongoing. A lot of times I think other people in other industries, of course you want to grow, but in the film industry, it never, that feeling of always trying to make things more intense, making more, I guess you could say, working with, better talent supposedly, which I don't always agree. More A, B, C-list talent, working with other people that are higher up in the industry. All these different types of things. That's kind of how you want to be seen, I think, a lot of times. People don't want to admit that, or how things are judged, right? Which I think if you look at somebody like Daniel Day-Lewis, hypothetically, who's probably maybe the best actor of all times, I think he's doing Shoes now. I heard that years ago that he was doing Shoes even when they were doing Gangs of New York, where they had to go find him. I think it was in Italy at the time. I hope I didn't screw this story up. It's years ago. They went and found him, Leonardo DiCaprio, Scorsese. They convinced him to do the movie. Whatever the case may be, I think he's back making Shoes. What's amazing about his career is, I think a lot of people look at him and go, oh my God, he could have made any movie he wanted, not only because of his acting skills, his popularity, and everyone wanted to work with him. But if I looked at somebody like his career, I think, and I may be wrong, he did what he wanted to do. He made the films he wanted to make, and he knew he was engulfed in what he was doing, and he believed in it. And he's a method actor, obviously, so he would go into these things for long periods of time. But I think if you look at your life like that, a lot of times, I was going to do a podcast called Fine-Tuning Your Life, because I think a lot of us are kind of caught up, again, not looking at our life or not living the life that we really always want to live. We're always kind of judging ourselves or letting other people judge us. And a lot of that is being done by our possessions or kind of what we're showing off, I guess you could say. And again, I'm not telling anybody to be a lazy piece of shit. I want you to drive or strive for as many goals you want. And if you really look at a lot of people, public speakers, people in industries, a lot of YouTube videos, it's all about getting to the next level. And you can't get to this next level because you're this. You can't do this because you're that. And all these things. And I get that. Everybody wants to improve. I do too, in certain things. But a lot of us have to realize a lot of that is bullshit. Because again, I've talked about this a million times in my podcast, my YouTube videos. You are your own individual. You need to figure out what works best for you. And a lot of times you're going after things that you may not necessarily even realize at the time, but they're not for you. Did you ever do something where you just you're aiming for something and you're doing it? It could be whatever. And then you finished it and you're like, why did I put so much time and effort into that? The payoff wasn't close. And it's ridiculous. Like you were almost blindsided by yourself. You didn't realize a lot of things you were going for, or you thought you were going to become successful. I see that happen. I'll just use for an example in real estate. I see a lot of people all of a sudden, especially in Florida, they want to change careers. So they know it's very simple to go get a real estate license. I got one like 25 years ago. You could get it in a week. I think you could get your mortgage license in a week. Those type of industries, you get it, and then you have to go for different, you got to keep up with it, and you got to go take a state, I'm sure, you pass the class, got to pass the test, then you take the state test, and then you become a real estate agent. And then as time goes on, you have, you have classes you have to take. Now you can take them online. It's like 45 hours. Whatever the case may be, it's like an automatic degree. But a lot of people go and they spend all this time doing all this stuff at real estate, tons of people, and then after a while they're like, what the hell am I doing here? My goal in life was never to sell homes. My goal wasn't to drive people around and, with families or do this or that. I'm not digging on that profession. If you love doing that, one of my closest friends does that. A lot of my friends actually do real estate. Some do residential, and I grew up in an environment where my mother-in-law was all commercial real estate, and people make billions of dollars. I'm not ripping on it. Don't think I am. I'm just using for an example. A lot of times people think if you do certain things, that's what's going to make you happy. But if you stop yourself and say, wait a minute, what's really the end aim? Like, what's the end game here, right? Is it to go into commercial real estate? Is it really to sell homes for $250,000? Is it to sell homes for $500,000? Do I really have the patience to do this? I think what most people miss is, if you're really interested in something, possibly shadow somebody for a while before you fully commit. That could be even filmmaking, and I'm not talking being an extra. You want to be a film director? If possible, Go find some directors, I don't care if they're independent filmmakers, and say, I'll work for free. I'll try to be as accessible as I can, but I still have to do what I have to do, but I'll help you in any way I can. And that could go for real estate. I don't care if you want to be a cop. It's hard to go on a beat with a cop. I don't care if you want to be in mortgage. I don't care if you want to be a stockbroker. Whatever you want to be, I would first consider doing that. That's just something I'm going to throw in there in this podcast. Because I think a lot of us fully commit financially or fully just jump in and think that's what we want to do. And then after a year or two are miserable or it didn't work out the way we thought, which can happen to anybody. But I even have a close friend that got a PhD in psychology. And if you think about it, after all the schooling and everything he finally, it hit him. Then all of a sudden, his career is listening to other people's problems. And it's also being around a lot of people that are mentally ill. And your whole life is revolved around that. And that goes for nursing as well. Some people stick with it. Some people, I think, I know a lot of nursing they either love it or after a while it is so daunting because all they're around is illness, which makes sense. But back to my cousins or my family or whatever, the intensity, I should say. I think, and I'm going to tell you, I used to think more was better, and I think we've all been programmed that way. More expensive cars are better. The bigger home is better. More kids may be better. Whatever more and more and more is. And I'm here to tell you, I don't think that is the answer. It may be for you, but I think for a lot of people, understanding who they are, what their patience level is, and also the stress you can handle. Because as you know, stress is one of the biggest killers out there. I could see with a lot of my friends, colleagues, a lot of people, when I look at them, a lot of them are trying to pretend they're not stressed out of their minds when they are. If you are in that situation, learn how to back out of it. And I know you'd be like, how the hell do I back out of that? I own this car I'm upside down on. I'm in a house. What do you want me to leave my kids? I'm in a certain school district, all that shit. I'm not telling you to do that. But you're going to have to find alternatives, I think, a lot of times. Because a lot of times we go so deep into the shit, we don't realize how bad it smells. And we finance things that in the long term we can afford maybe. But we didn't realize what it would entail to sign a mortgage for 30 years for a price or a home that expensive. And before you know it, you forget you got kids coming up, going to maybe private schools, going to college, getting married. You need all this additional money. And a lot of people's career, let's face it, it doesn't keep going up the way you think it goes up. So in your 20s, you're kind of climbing, and even in your 30s, and a lot of people are like, oh, you should be killing it by the time you're 40s. Yeah, you may be killing it to a certain degree, but you're killing it according to like maybe your wife or your girlfriend or a few people. Before you know it, if you have a few kids, you're supporting 5 adults basically on that income. And again, I'm not saying people can't do that. Of course they could do that. But a lot of people can't do that, especially if they get hurt, something happens to your significant other, you may have a child with special needs, whatever the case may be. No one knows the future for the most part, but there's always seems to be more and more expenses. At least I think that way. So my point here again regarding the intensity level, what worked for me is I live an extremely intense lifestyle as far as traveling goes that I don't think most people could even relate to. But I conformed it to where it doesn't destroy me anymore with my job or physically, because I had a structured a certain way. I also have my girlfriend who helps me out with a lot of it, which from a stress point of view, there's no way I would be able to do that. So she helps me book my travel. Also, when I'm traveling, she also helps me find hotels for certain, or if something happens on the road, rental car, any of that. She is there to help me. And I think a lot of times we need help in areas that we don't want to ask for it. And that may be another thing you might think about as far as intensity goes, is how much help do you have? And is it the right help? Because I think a lot of people think, how do I say this, that a lot of people around them are helping them when they're actually sucking off of them. So yeah, they're helping you, but it's usually a lot of times you got to pay that person help, which there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is a lot of times as you take on more things and if your life becomes more intense, more people need to help you. But at the same time, you either feel like now you have to help them as well, or it may even cost you more and more money. And if you can't afford to do that, then you really have to take, a hard look at yourself, because back to intensity, I think we all are intense, but I think we need to realize in this day and age, at least in 2019 from what I'm seeing, that we are constantly cluttered by a lot of things constantly coming to us and so many more additional expenses, and the cost of living, I think, compared to my parents, and I'm not saying it was cheap when they were younger, but if you even look at your kids, if you have children, I'm talking about if you're middle-aged, or even if you're not, things are a lot more money, and you need a lot more things. It could go from your cell phone to your computer to a car. Most people always needed a car. But clothing, Wi-Fi, insurance is extremely expensive, even for cars for young people, middle-aged, whatever the case may be. Health insurance, life insurance. And again, I'm not saying our parents didn't have that as well. But then even if you look at a lot of just small things, there's always certain things that are coming up where I think my mother and father, for the most part, you had a car payment, you had auto insurance, I think. You had a cable. They didn't even have cable bill originally. That's another thing, cable, Wi-Fi at home or wherever you go. They had televisions, then eventually cable, electric bill, and they paid their mortgage and kind of call it a day to a certain degree. And then you go out to eat once a week. Now I think it's just at a whole different level. It's just at a whole different level expenses. I look at my kids a lot of times and I'm thinking, what they're trying to get, my youngest, I have 2 daughters, and the older one seems to live a much more, I guess you could say, casual lifestyle. She loves working out. She kind of works part-time, and she goes to school part-time. And she's not caught up in clothes, any of those type of things. Makeup, not caught up with what she doesn't have by any means. She wears the same clothes. My younger daughter loves things, loves possession. She loves makeup. She loves working. So she basically almost works full-time. She almost does full-time school. She likes to travel a lot more. She likes to go to festivals. And if I look back at both of them, they both, I definitely think, live the life they want to live. But I could tell my younger daughter is, for the most part, I think, a lot more stressed. And both of them have their own, my younger daughter has type 1 diabetes, which I can't, that's stressful enough. And my older daughter had a liver transplant. So they both deal with medical conditions on their own, their own terms and how they want to deal with it. But I even talked to my daughter and told her, the younger one, hey, I know you want more money and, you want a certain lifestyle, but, back up maybe at work. One or the other is going to suffer, school or work. What's more important? So she backed off at work, and now she's going to the University UCF, which she's very excited about. But she had to really say, hey, do I want more money? Of course, she wanted more money, but how much stress was that putting on her? She was always exhausted. So I think whoever's listening to this podcast, kind of look at your life that way. Or if you have colleagues or anybody else, I don't want you to judge anybody, but a lot of times if you can just kind of look around, because I think that's where I learn a lot of things. I have family members, friends that are extremely wealthy, and I look at their life and go, would I want that or would I not want that? Would I be willing to do what they do? From the minute you wake up to the minute, you kind of go to bed, their lifestyle. And you may love their lifestyle. You may have friends that are extremely wealthy that just live the life of Riley. Then you may have other friends that are broke all the time, that work like animals, and you just can't figure it out. I have those as well, which is quite interesting. And I'm not putting this on a money thing, because regardless if you're broke or wealthy, I see people living extremely stressful lives. And again, I think the reason is, one is probably finances or money management has a big part of it, but it's something also internally in them that is always just has to be intense, or it has to beat the shit out of them, where they either, again, have to prove how much they're doing or show everybody again what their worth is, or there's all these different types of things, but I think you get my point. I don't want to get repetitive here. But yeah, please take a hard look at your life, where you're spending money, and what you're kind of doing. Back to self-awareness, because I don't think a lot of times, too, people look at it and say, because I want this intense lifestyle, or I want all these possessions, a lot of times we make others around us crazy if we're not achieving those. And you don't even realize that you may be mad at home, you may be mad at different, you may be treating people differently. And if you can't afford certain things, I talk about this on my podcast, man, you have to, do not kill yourself trying to keep up with a lot of things, especially payments. When you buy a car, you got to realize that damn car is not your car until you pay it off. The bank owns that damn car. Your home, if you buy a piece of property for 30 years, and again, you may make money on that, you got to realize you're signing a 30-year loan. And I think people only look at the moment of having this home. Like, this is going to be unbelievable. This is a game changer. And if you're buying a home and it costs, if you got to work 2 to 3 weeks to pay for your mortgage, you have to realize how strapped you are, man. I mean, a lot of people don't look at it like that, because all the added things when you buy a home, it could be anything. You could be even buying a business. If you do buy a business, just be careful, because that business could be one of the best things that ever happened to you. It also can destroy you emotionally, physically. It could ruin your relationships with whoever. So just be very aware of that. And remember, there's a difference between controlled intensity and out of control intensity. You got to remember that too. And I don't think a lot of people really realize that. When you're in control of your intensity and you're making moves and each one's kind of helping you move to the next, notch and getting you to where you want to be, but not financially or emotionally or physically destroying you, that's kind of where you want to be. But I think a lot of people take too many jumps, too fast, too forward, and I've made a million mistakes on every level. So that's why I talk about this. Sometimes the things you don't do are going to be the things that help you the most in life, because I don't know if you've ever done that. You were about to buy something that may have been out of your range, or you were about to do something. You may have wanted to work for a certain company and then they went out of business. Thank God you didn't change jobs. A lot of times you don't look at what didn't happen, which worked out really well for you, right? Because we usually look at things and say, well, look at what happened here. I could have been at this level, right? We always look at like things that would have excelled, but you don't look at a lot of things as holy shit. And that goes for relationships as well. I talk about that in one of my programs, where dating different women, or dodging a lot of bullets throughout your life, and then hopefully you end up with the one you want. But when you're going through different women or dating different people, you're always like, is this the one? But as time went on, if it wasn't the one you didn't end up with, then you look at that person 10, 20 years down the line. Where did they end up? They may have ended up in a better position or a worse position, but you're most likely going to be happy with who you ended up with. And that's kind of like life. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there. I actually got to go meet my father, but please get a grip on that. Again, I may do a podcast still, like fine-tuning your life. Just sit back and fine-tune it, kind of like a mechanic sometimes has to fine-tune its car. You may be off a little bit here or there. Just really sit back. And I did a podcast on just sit down and think. If you work out, go in a sauna, even if it's 5, 10, 15 minutes, I talk about, and just don't bring your phone in, and just sit there and think what's aggravating me, what's helping me, how do I feel right now? Look at the big picture. And I really believe that. I'm telling you, you may think I'm nuts. The first few times you'll still be thinking about your phone, or you'll be thinking about your like, I got to do this. Like, what do I got to pick up at the grocery store? What do I got to do? Oh yeah, I got to pay that bill, all that shit. But eventually it will take time where you clear your mind out and you're like, all right, let me figure this out. I do want to get a new car, and I want to get a Maserati. I've always wanted one, I'm just saying. And then you're like, wait a minute, I got a nice car now. Do I really want to buy that car, even used? Do I want to make that payment, or do I want to fork out all that cash? If you have it, God bless, but do you really need it? Or do you want to maybe take that money and invest it or do something else with it? It's just something to think about. I'm just using for an example, but really that takes time to learn, because again, the intensity, I think a lot of times I catch myself doing that too, is like saying, okay, I got to go do this, I got to do that. So all right, if you get a chance, you can just check out my YouTube channel, Rich CELENZA. And actually, my website is the same thing, richcelenza.com. That's got everything on there, including my Mastering Self-Confidence program. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as well. All right, well, take care, and if you're traveling, safe travels.